There are places in human imagination that exist with such clarity, such persistence, such elaborate detail across cultures and centuries, that the boundary between the imagined and the real becomes permeable, becomes a question rather than a certainty. Agartha is such a place. The name appears in esoteric literature of the 19th and early 20th centuries, describes an underground kingdom, a subterranean civilization of immense age and advanced wisdom, hidden beneath the surface of the earth, accessible through tunnel systems that penetrate deep into the planet, that connect to caves and passages in mountains across Asia and beyond, that lead down through layers of rock to vast chambers, where an ancient race lives in cities illuminated by sources other than the sun, where knowledge has been preserved from epochs before recorded history, where technology and spirituality have evolved along paths unknown to surface dwellers. The legend says that entrances exist, that they are guarded or hidden, that those who find them and who are deemed worthy may enter, may receive teachings, may return transformed, or that they may never return at all, may choose to remain in the underground world, may become part of Agartha, may leave the surface behind permanently. This is the story as it appears in the books and the accounts that have accumulated over the past century and a half. The story that has captured imaginations, that has sent explorers into remote mountain regions searching for entrances, that has generated theories and speculation and elaborate cosmologies, that exists as a fully developed alternative geography, complete with maps and descriptions and claimed first-hand testimonies. And like all persistent legends, it is built on layers, is not a simple invention, but is an accretion of older myths and newer interpretations, of cultural traditions and literary embellishments, of genuine mysteries about the earth and of fabrications designed to fill the gaps in knowledge with appealing fictions. To understand Agartha, to understand the legend of the hollow earth and the tunnel systems that supposedly penetrate the planet, we must distinguish between what is legend and what is real, between the imaginative constructions and the actual underground features that exist, between the desire for mystery and the genuine mysteries that remain unsolved, between the stories people tell about what is beneath our feet and what we actually know through science and through exploration. This exploration will not claim that Agartha exists as the legends describe it. It will instead examine why the legend exists, what cultural and psychological needs it fulfills, what real underground features may have inspired elements of the story, what we actually know about the interior of the earth, and about the extent of natural and human-made underground spaces, and why the idea of a hidden world beneath the surface continues to resonate even in an age when satellite imagery has mapped nearly every square meter of the Earth's surface, when we have drilled deep into the crust, when the scientific understanding of the planet's structure is detailed and well supported. The hollow Earth theory, in its various forms, is the foundation on which the Agartha legend rests. The idea that the Earth is not a solid sphere, but is hollow or partially hollow, that there are vast empty spaces within it, possibly inhabited, possibly accessible, has appeared in multiple cultures and has been articulated in different ways across history. Some versions imagine the Earth as completely hollow, with openings at the poles that allow access to the interior. Some imagine concentric spheres, a hollow earth within the earth we know, nested like Russian dolls. Some imagine vast cave systems and tunnel networks that honeycomb the crust and upper mantle, creating a three-dimensional labyrinth extending for thousands of miles beneath the surface. These ideas are not supported by modern science. We know through seismology, through the study of earthquake waves that travel through the Earth, that the planet has a layered structure with a solid inner core, a liquid outer core, a solid mantle, and a thin crust. We know the densities and compositions of these layers through multiple independent lines of evidence. We know that the Earth generates its own magnetic field through the motion of liquid iron in the outer core. We know that the mass and the moment of inertia of the Earth are consistent with a mostly solid planet, not with a hollow one. The hollow Earth, as a physical reality, is not consistent with what we know about the planet, but the legend is not primarily about physics. It is about something else, about the human need for undiscovered places, for territories that remain beyond the reach of conventional knowledge, for the possibility that despite all our exploration and all our technology, there are still secrets, still mysteries, still realms that we have not penetrated. In a world that feels increasingly mapped and known and accessible, the idea of a hidden kingdom underground, of passages that lead to places unmarked on any map, of ancient civilizations maintaining their existence in concealment, offers something that the mapped world does not. It offers wonder. It offers the possibility that reality is larger and stranger than the official narratives acknowledge. If this introduction has drawn you in, if you are curious about where this exploration will go, about how we will navigate between legend and reality, between the compelling stories and the actual evidence, then please like this video and subscribe to this channel. These deep investigations take time to create, and your support helps me continue making them. Let me know in the comments where you are listening from and whether you have encountered the Agartha legend before, whether you are familiar with hollow earth theories, whether this is new territory for you, or whether you are returning to questions you have considered before. Now let us begin properly with the origins of the legend, with the cultural and historical roots of the idea of underground kingdoms and the hollow earth. The concept of subterranean realms, of worlds beneath the surface, appears in mythologies across the globe and across time. These are not, for the most part, hollow earth theories in the modern sense. They are cosmological structures, are underworlds and realms of the dead, are places where gods or spirits or ancestors dwell, are parts of a vertical universe that includes the surface world and realms above and below. But they establish a pattern, establish that the beneath has been associated with the sacred, with the hidden, with the powerful, for as long as humans have told stories about the structure of the cosmos. In Greek mythology, Hades was the underworld, the realm of the dead, reached by crossing the river Styx, ruled by the god Hades, a place beneath the earth where souls went after death. In Norse mythology, Hell was a similar realm, a place beneath the roots of Yggdrasil, the world tree, where those who did not die in battle would go. In Hindu and Buddhist cosmologies, there are multiple levels of existence, some beneath the surface, some inhabited by nagas, serpent beings, some associated with particular spiritual states or karmic conditions. In Christian tradition, hell is beneath, is down, is in the depths of the earth, is the place of punishment and separation from God. These mythological underworlds are not the same as the hollow earth of later theories. They are spiritual or cosmological realms, are not necessarily conceived as physical places that could be reached by walking or digging, though sometimes they are presented as having physical entrances, caves or chasms that lead to the underworld. But they establish the cultural pattern of associating the beneath with the other, with realms that are hidden from ordinary view, with places that have power and significance beyond the surface world. The shift to hollow earth theories. To the idea that there are actual physical spaces beneath the surface that could be explored and inhabited by physical beings, occurs primarily in the early modern period in Europe and America, influenced by the expansion of geographical knowledge, by the exploration of previously unknown lands, by the development of scientific thinking that began to ask questions about the physical structure of the Earth. One of the earliest articulated hollow Earth theories in the modern sense comes from the 17th century, from the astronomer Edmund Halley, the same Halley for whom the comet is named. In 1692, Halley proposed that the Earth might consist of concentric shells, hollow spheres one inside another, separated by atmospheres and possibly rotating at different speeds to account for variations in the magnetic field. Halley was a serious scientist, and his proposal, while speculative, was an attempt to explain genuine observations, specifically the behavior of compass needles and the variations in magnetic declination. Halley's hollow Earth was not inhabited, was a purely physical hypothesis. But it opened the conceptual door, established that serious thinkers could consider the possibility that the interior of the Earth was not simply solid rock throughout. In the 18th and 19th centuries, the hollow Earth idea was elaborated by various writers, some scientific, some speculative, some fictional. The Swiss mathematician Leonhard Euler proposed a single hollow sphere with a sun at the center. The American John Cleves Sims Jr., in the early 19th century, proposed a hollow Earth with openings at the poles and with habitable inner surfaces. Sims promoted his theory vigorously, petitioned Congress to fund an expedition to the North Pole to find the opening, attracted followers who called themselves Sims holers. Sims' theory was not supported by evidence, but it was taken seriously enough that it was debated in newspapers and lecture halls, that it entered popular consciousness. Jules Verne's novel Journey to the Center of the Earth, published in 1864, brought the idea of a hollow, or at least extensively cavernous Earth to a wide audience. Verne's novel is fiction, is adventure literature, but it draws on the genuine geological questions of the period, on the fact that the interior of the Earth was not well understood, on the possibility that there might be vast caves and underground spaces. Verne's protagonists enter through a volcanic crater in Iceland, descend through passages and chambers, encounter an underground ocean, find evidence of prehistoric life, eventually return to the surface through a volcanic eruption in Italy. The novel is an imaginative exploration of what might be beneath, uses the hollow earth concept as a setting for adventure, does not claim to be factual, but contributes to the cultural imaginary of underground realms. And then, in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the legend of Agartha specifically begins to appear, emerging from the theosophical movement and from related esoteric traditions. And this is where the story becomes more complex, more layered, more difficult to disentangle from its sources. Theosophy was a spiritual movement founded in 1875 by Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, Henry Steele Olcott, and William Quan Judge. The Theosophical Society promoted a synthesis of Eastern and Western spiritual traditions, claimed access to ancient wisdom from hidden masters, the Mahatmas, who were said to possess knowledge far beyond that of ordinary humans. Blavatsky's writings, particularly The Secret Doctrine published in 1888, presented an elaborate cosmology and a history of the earth and humanity that drew on Hindu and Buddhist concepts, on Western occultism, on her own claimed revelations from the Mahatmas. Agartha or Agartha or Agartha, the spelling varies, is mentioned in theosophical literature as a hidden kingdom, a center of spiritual power, located somewhere in Central Asia, possibly beneath the Himalayas, possibly in the Gobi Desert region. The concept is associated with Shambhala, another hidden kingdom in Buddhist tradition, though the relationship between Agartha and Shambhala in theosophical writings is complex and not always consistent. The elaboration of the Agartha legend is primarily due to the French occultist Alexandre Saint-Yves d'Alveda, who in 1886 published a book titled Mission de l'Inde, later expanded in works that described Agartha in considerable detail. Saint-Yves claimed to have received information about Agartha through psychic means or through communication with the Mahatmas. He described it as an underground kingdom with a population of millions, ruled by a supreme pontiff, the Brahitma, with advanced technology and spiritual knowledge, with libraries containing the accumulated wisdom of ages. He described tunnel systems connecting Agartha to the surface world, with entrances in various locations, guarded to prevent the uninitiated from accessing the underground realm. Saint-Yves Agartha is a utopia, is a perfected society, is a repository of knowledge that the surface world has lost or never possessed. It is also a political and spiritual center that supposedly influences surface events, that works behind the scenes to guide humanity, that will one day reveal itself when humanity is ready for the knowledge it possesses. This is the Agartha that entered esoteric and occult literature, that was picked up by other writers, that was expanded and modified, that became a fixture in the alternative cosmology of the hollow earth and lost civilizations. And it is important to be clear that this Agartha is not based on archaeological evidence or on documented exploration. It is based on claimed revelations, on channeled information, on the speculative elaborations of occult writers who were drawing on fragmentary references in Asian religious texts and on their own imaginations. The Buddhist concept of Shambhala, which is sometimes confused with or conflated with Agartha, has a different origin and a different character. Shambhala appears in Tibetan Buddhist texts as a hidden kingdom, a pure land, a place where the teachings of the Kala Chakra Tantra are preserved. It is described as being north of Tibet, possibly beyond the Himalayas, possibly in a region that is not easily accessible. But Shambhala in the Buddhist texts is primarily a spiritual concept, is a place that exists in relation to spiritual practice and realization, is not necessarily conceived as a physical location that could be found by ordinary geographical exploration. The Theosophists and later occultists took the Buddhist Shambhala, combined it with their own concepts of hidden masters and ancient wisdom, added the idea of a physically accessible underground kingdom, and created Agartha as a synthesis, as a legend that drew on multiple sources, but that was primarily a construction of late 19th and early 20th century Western occultism. And yet the legend persisted, was elaborated, attracted attention and belief. In the early 20th century, the Russian explorer and mystic Nicholas Roerich led expeditions to Central Asia, partly to search for evidence of Shambhala, partly to study the region's art and culture. Roerich's accounts of his expeditions, published in the 1920s and 30s, include references to local legends about hidden cities and underground passages, include claims that he received signs or communications from the masters, include descriptions that added to the Agartha narrative. Ferdynand Ossendowski, a Polish writer, published a book in 1922 titled Beasts, Men and Gods, describing his experiences traveling through Mongolia and Tibet during the Russian Civil War. Ossendowski's book includes a chapter about Agartha, describes it as an underground kingdom, claims that he was told about it by Mongolian lamas, describes it in terms that are similar to Saint-Yves' account. Ossendowski's book was widely read, was influential in spreading the Agartha legend to a broader audience. The accuracy of Ossendowski's account has been questioned. Some researchers have suggested that he borrowed heavily from Saint-Yves, that his descriptions of Agartha are not based on genuine local traditions, but are repetitions of the Western occult literature. The Mongolian and Tibetan traditions do include references to hidden lands and to spiritual centers, but whether these traditions specifically describe an underground kingdom called Agartha in the way that Ossendowski presents it is disputed. What is clear is that by the 1920s, the Agartha legend had become established in the popular imagination, had a detailed geography and cosmology, had claimed eyewitness accounts, had become the subject of books and articles and speculation. And it had also, unfortunately, become entangled with political ideologies, particularly with certain strands of German occultism and with the Nazi appropriation of esoteric ideas. Some Nazi ideologues, particularly those in the Thule Society and in the SS Ahnenerbe, the organization dedicated to researching Germanic history and occult traditions, were interested in Agartha and Shambhala, saw these underground kingdoms as possibly related to Aryan origins, as potential sources of ancient wisdom or power. There were expeditions sent to Tibet in the 1930s, ostensibly for scientific research, but also driven by these esoteric interests. The details of what these expeditions were actually looking for and what they found are difficult to verify, are mixed up with propaganda and with post-war mythology. But the association between the Agartha legend and Nazi occultism has persisted, has added a darker dimension to the legend, has made the serious study of the legend more difficult because it is tainted by this association. After World War II, the Hollow Earth and Agartha legends continued to circulate in occult and fringe literature, were picked up by UFO researchers who sometimes suggested that flying saucers came not from outer space, but from inner Earth, from the hollow regions, or from Agartha. Were incorporated into increasingly elaborate conspiracy theories that connected underground kingdoms to government cover-ups and secret societies and advanced technologies. This is the legend as it exists today, as it circulates on the internet and in alternative history books. As it is believed or half-believed or entertained as possibility by people who are dissatisfied with mainstream narratives, who are searching for hidden truths, who find the idea of Agartha compelling regardless of whether the evidence supports it. And now we must turn to the evidence, must ask what is actually beneath the Earth's surface, what we know through science and through exploration, what real underground features exist that might have inspired elements of the legend, what the boundaries are between the imagined and the real. The earth beneath our feet is not hollow, but it is also not simply solid in the way that a ball of rock would be solid. The planet has structure, has layers with different compositions and different physical states, has complexities that have taken centuries of scientific investigation to understand, and that still hold mysteries at the deepest levels. Understanding what we actually know about the Earth's interior and how we know it is essential to evaluating the hollow Earth theories, and the Agartha legend is the foundation for distinguishing between the imaginative and the real. The primary method by which we know about the Earth's interior is seismology, the study of earthquake waves. When an earthquake occurs, it generates waves that travel through the Earth. These waves come in different types. Primary waves, P waves, are compressional waves that can travel through both solid and liquid. Secondary waves, S waves, are shear waves that can only travel through solid material. By studying how these waves travel, how fast they move through different materials, how they are refracted and reflected at boundaries between layers, seismologists can construct a detailed picture of the Earth's internal structure. The evidence from thousands of earthquakes recorded at thousands of seismic stations around the world over more than a century has established the basic layered structure of the Earth. The outermost layer is the crust, the thin solid shell on which we live, ranging from about 5 kilometers thick beneath the oceans to about 70 kilometers thick beneath the continents. Beneath the crust is the mantle, a thick layer of solid rock that extends down to about 2,900 kilometers depth. The mantle is solid, but it is not rigid. It flows slowly over geological time, drives plate tectonics, creates the volcanism and the mountain building and the earthquakes that shape the surface. Beneath the mantle is the core, divided into two parts. The outer core, from about 2,900 to 5,150 kilometers depth, is liquid iron and nickel. We know it is liquid because S waves do not travel through it, because P waves are strongly refracted at the core mantle boundary. The inner core, from 5,150 kilometers to the center of the Earth at 6,371 kilometers depth, is solid iron and nickel, solidified under the immense pressure at the center of the planet despite temperatures that are comparable to the surface of the Sun. This structure is not speculative. It is supported by multiple independent lines of evidence. The behavior of seismic waves, the mass and density of the Earth measured through gravitational studies, the moment of inertia of the Earth, how the planet responds to rotational forces, which tells us how mass is distributed internally. The Earth's magnetic field, generated by the motion of liquid iron in the outer core, by the dynamo effect that creates and maintains the field over geological time. The compositions of meteorites, which are remnants of the formation of the solar system and which give us information about what the Earth is likely made of in its interior. All of this evidence points to a layered, mostly solid Earth, not to a hollow Earth. The idea that there could be vast, empty spaces within the planet, spaces large enough to contain cities or civilizations, is not compatible with what we know about the Earth's structure and composition. But this does not mean that there are no voids within the Earth. The crust, the outermost layer, contains caves and fissures and underground rivers and chambers, created by various geological processes, some of them extensive enough to be remarkable, some of them still being discovered and explored. These real underground features are worth examining in detail, both because they are interesting in their own right and because they may have inspired elements of the Hollow Earth and Agartha legends. The most extensive natural underground spaces on Earth are cave systems, formed primarily in limestone and other soluble rocks through the process of dissolution by groundwater. Limestone is calcium carbonate, formed from the compressed remains of marine organisms, deposited in layers on ancient sea floors. When rainwater, which is slightly acidic due to dissolved carbon dioxide, percolates through the soil and into the rock, it slowly dissolves the limestone, enlarging cracks and fissures, creating passages and chambers over thousands or millions of years. The result is cave systems that can extend for dozens or even hundreds of kilometers, that can include chambers large enough to hold cathedrals, that can have multiple levels connected by vertical shafts or inclined passages, that can contain underground rivers and lakes and waterfalls. That are among the most extraordinary features of the Earth's surface environment. The longest known cave system in the world is Mammoth Cave in Kentucky, with more than 650 kilometers of surveyed passages. Mammoth Cave is a multi-level labyrinth carved through limestone by underground rivers, with passages ranging from tight crawls to large walking tunnels to enormous chambers. The cave has been known and explored for thousands of years, was used by indigenous peoples, was commercially developed in the 19th century as a tourist attraction, is now a national park. And despite more than 2 centuries of exploration and survey, new passages are still being discovered. The total extent of the system is still being determined. Jewel Cave in South Dakota has over 330 kilometers of of surveyed passages, making it the third longest cave in the world. Sistema Sac Acton in Mexico, a flooded cave system in the Yucatan Peninsula, has over 370 kilometers of surveyed underwater passages, was formed by the dissolution of limestone in a coastal environment, is now submerged due to rising sea levels after the last ice age. The survey of underwater caves requires specialized diving skills, requires equipment and training to navigate flooded passages where there is no access to air, where getting lost can be fatal. The exploration of these systems is ongoing, is discovering new passages, is mapping features that were completely unknown until recently. These cave systems are genuinely vast, are three-dimensional mazes that extend through the rock in ways that are difficult to visualize from the surface. And they demonstrate that the Earth's crust is not solid rock throughout, that there are significant voids, that the underground landscape is complex and in many places still incompletely known. The deepest caves on Earth, the caves that descend furthest below the surface, are found in regions where there are thick sequences of soluble rock, where the geological structure allows water to penetrate deeply, where vertical relief allows for the development of deep shafts and passages. The deepest known cave is Vyevkina Cave in the Caucasus Mountains of Georgia, verified to a depth of 2,212 meters below the surface. Krubera Cave, also in the Caucasus, reaches 2,197 meters. These caves are vertical systems, have series of shafts and chambers connected by passages, require technical rope work and underground camping to explore, are at the limits of what human explorers can currently access. At these depths, the conditions are challenging. The temperature increases with depth. The geothermal gradient means that the rock and the air in the caves get warmer the deeper you go. The pressure increases. The access routes are complex and dangerous, require multiple days underground, require carrying supplies and equipment through difficult terrain. And yet cavers continue to push deeper, continue to explore the limits of these systems, continue to discover new chambers and passages at depths that were thought to be the bottom until they were not. These deep caves demonstrate that natural underground spaces can extend to remarkable depths, can penetrate more than 2 kilometers into the Earth's crust. But they are still in the crust, are still in the outermost thin layer of the planet. The deepest cave is less than 1% of the distance to the core. The scale of the Earth's interior, the thousands of kilometers of mantle and core beneath even the deepest caves, is difficult to comprehend, is a reminder that the underground spaces we can access are a tiny fraction of the planet's volume. In addition to caves formed by dissolution, there are caves formed by other processes. Lava tubes are tunnels created by flowing lava, formed when the surface of a lava flow cools and solidifies while the molten lava beneath continues to flow, eventually draining out and leaving a hollow tube. Lava tubes can be extensive, can extend for kilometers from volcanic vents, can have diameters of tens of meters. The longest known lava tube is in Hawaii, the Kazumura Cave, which extends for more than 65 kilometers. Lava tubes have also been identified on the Moon and on Mars, are features that form wherever there is volcanic activity, are of interest as potential sites for human habitation in extraterrestrial environments because they provide natural shelter from radiation and from temperature extremes. There are also tectonic caves formed by the movement of rock along faults, by the collapse of chambers created when rock fractures and shifts. These are less common than dissolution caves or lava tubes, but can be locally significant. And there are glacier caves, formed by meltwater flowing through or beneath glaciers, creating tunnels of ice rather than rock, temporary features that change as the glacier moves and melts. The caves that exist, the real caves that have been explored and documented, are remarkable enough without needing to invent hollow earth theories. They demonstrate that the Earth's crust is riddled with voids, that the underground is a genuine frontier, that there are places beneath the surface that are strange and beautiful and challenging, that stretch the limits of human exploration. But do any of these real cave systems resemble the descriptions of the tunnels to Agartha, the networks that supposedly penetrate deep into the earth and connect to vast inhabited chambers beneath the Himalayas or the Gobi Desert or other locations in Central Asia? The answer is no. The cave systems in Central Asia are not exceptional by global standards, are not larger or deeper or more extensive than cave systems in other regions. The limestone formations in parts of Central Asia do contain caves, some of which are locally significant, some of which have been used by humans for shelter or for religious purposes over thousands of years. But there is no evidence of tunnel systems penetrating deep into the earth in these regions, no evidence of chambers that could house the cities and the populations described in the Agartha legend. The Himalayas are young mountains, geologically speaking, are still rising due to the collision of the Indian and Eurasian tectonic plates. The rocks are heavily fractured, are being actively eroded, are not stable environments for the formation of large cave systems. There are caves in the Himalayas, caves that are used by Buddhist and Hindu practitioners for meditation and retreat, caves that are mentioned in religious texts and that have spiritual significance. But these are relatively small features. Our rock shelters and shallow caves are not the entrances to vast underground kingdoms. The deepest hole ever drilled by humans is the Kola superdeep borehole in Russia, which reached a depth of 12,262 meters, just over 12 kilometers, before drilling was stopped in 1992 due to higher than expected temperatures at depth. This is the deepest penetration into the Earth's crust that has been achieved, and it is still less than 1/5 of 1% of the distance to the Earth's center. The hole encountered fractured and metamorphosed rock, encountered higher temperatures than predicted, encountered hydrogen gas and other unexpected features. But it did not encounter hollow spaces, did not find evidence of vast chambers or tunnels, confirmed that the crust at this location is solid rock, is not honeycombed with voids. The scientific evidence, the evidence from seismology and from drilling and from the study of the Earth's gravitational and magnetic fields, is clear and is consistent. The Earth is not hollow. There are no vast empty spaces in the mantle or the core. The underground spaces that exist, the caves and the fissures and the fractures are in the crust, are at depths measured in kilometers at most, not in hundreds or thousands of kilometers. And yet the legend persists. Why? What is it about the idea of Agartha, about the hollow earth, that continues to attract belief and interest despite the scientific evidence against it? Part of the answer is psychological. The hollow earth and Agartha offer what the surface world, increasingly mapped and known and monitored, does not offer. They offer mystery. They offer the possibility of discovery, of finding something that has been hidden, of accessing knowledge or places that are beyond the reach of ordinary people. They offer an alternative to the materialist, scientific worldview, offer a cosmology where spiritual advancement and ancient wisdom are real and are preserved in hidden places, where the surface world's problems and limitations are not the whole story. For people who feel that modernity is spiritually empty, that the dominance of scientific rationalism has eliminated the sacred and the mysterious from the world, the legend of Agartha provides a counter-narrative, provides a way of believing that there is more to reality than what can be measured and mapped. That there are realms of existence that science does not acknowledge. This is not necessarily irrational. The human need for meaning, for connection to something larger than the individual life, for a sense that the universe is not merely mechanistic, but has purpose and direction, these are deep needs, are not satisfied by purely materialist explanations. Religion and spirituality and myth have always addressed these needs, have provided frameworks for understanding existence that go beyond the empirical. The problem arises when the need for meaning leads to the rejection of evidence. When the desire to believe in hidden kingdoms and ancient wisdom overrides the willingness to engage with what we actually know about the planet, when the legend becomes a substitute for inquiry rather than a supplement to it. There is also a political dimension to the persistence of Hollow Earth and Agartha legends. These legends have been used, particularly in certain conspiracy theory communities, to support claims about hidden powers, about secret elites who possess knowledge or technology that they keep from the public, about government cover-ups of the true nature of reality. The Hollow Earth becomes, in these narratives, a literal hidden dimension of a world that is controlled by forces that operate in secret, that manipulate surface events from their underground bases. These conspiracy theories are for the most part not supported by evidence, are built on the same pattern as other conspiracy theories, take real mysteries or real gaps in public knowledge, and fill them with elaborate explanations that require assuming massive cover-ups and the cooperation of thousands or millions of people in maintaining secrecy. The more extraordinary the claim, the more extraordinary the evidence required to support it should be. And in the case of Hollow Earth conspiracy theories, the evidence is not there. But the persistence of these theories tells us something about trust, about the relationship between the public and institutions. About the fact that when people feel that they are not being told the truth about important matters, when there are real instances of government secrecy and real cover-ups of various kinds, it becomes easier to believe that other things are being hidden as well. That the official narrative is incomplete or false, that the truth is accessible only to those who are willing to look beyond the mainstream sources. The Agartha legend, in this context, becomes a symbol, becomes a way of expressing the belief that reality is not what we are told it is, that there are hidden dimensions, that the search for truth requires going beyond the accepted authorities and the conventional wisdom. This is a complex issue because it is true that institutional science and government do not have a perfect record of transparency and accuracy, that there are things that have been hidden or misrepresented, that skepticism of official narratives is sometimes warranted. But it is also true that the scientific method, the process of testing hypotheses against evidence, of peer review, of replication of results, is the most reliable method we have for determining what is actually true about the physical world. And the scientific evidence about the Earth's interior is robust, is based on multiple independent lines of inquiry, is not the product of a conspiracy to hide the truth about a hollow Earth. The challenge is to maintain appropriate skepticism, to question claims, and to demand evidence, without falling into the trap of rejecting all evidence that contradicts what we want to believe, without assuming that every gap in knowledge must be filled with extraordinary explanations. Let me turn now to the real underground features that are genuinely mysterious, that are not fully understood, that represent the legitimate frontiers of our knowledge about what is beneath the surface. Deep aquifers, underground reservoirs of water, are among the least understood features of the Earth's crust. Water percolates through soil and rock, accumulates in porous layers, creates reservoirs that can extend for hundreds of kilometers, that can contain vast quantities of water that are essential resources for human use in many regions. The mapping of aquifers, the understanding of how they are recharged and how they interact with surface water systems is incomplete, is ongoing research, is important for water management and for understanding climate and ecosystems. Some aquifers are at significant depths, are in rock layers that are hundreds or even thousands of meters below the surface. The water in these deep aquifers can be ancient, can have been isolated from the surface for thousands or millions of years, can have chemical compositions that tell us about the geological history of the region. The exploration of deep aquifers requires drilling, requires sampling and analysis, requires careful modeling to understand the flow of water through complex geological structures. There are also deep biosphere discoveries, the finding that microbial life exists deep in the Earth's crust, in rock pores and fractures thousands of meters below the surface. This life is adapted to conditions that are extreme by surface standards: high pressure, high temperature, complete darkness, no oxygen, relying on chemical energy from the rock and from fluids moving through the crust. The extent of this deep biosphere, the total mass of microbial life in the subsurface, may be comparable to the mass of life on the surface, is a reminder that the Earth's habitability extends far below where we can see that life finds ways to exist in environments that we would consider completely hostile. These discoveries are recent, are based on drilling and on sampling techniques that have only become available in the last few decades. They change our understanding of the limits of life, of where and how organisms can survive, of the total biomass of the planet. And they suggest that there may be other surprises in the deep earth, other features or processes that we have not yet discovered because we have not yet been able to sample deeply enough or widely enough. There are also anomalies in the geophysical data, features in the mantle and the core that are not fully explained, that are the subjects of ongoing research. The D-double-prime layer at the base of the mantle, a region just above the core mantle boundary, has unusual properties, has variations in seismic velocity and in other characteristics that suggest complex structure, possibly the accumulation of dense material that has sunk through the mantle, possibly chemical interactions between the mantle and the core. The understanding of this region is incomplete, is an active area of research in geophysics. The inner core, the solid iron sphere at the center of the Earth, rotates at a slightly different rate than the rest of the planet, is not perfectly aligned with the Earth's rotation axis, has internal structure that is still being investigated. The mechanisms by which the magnetic field is generated, the dynamics of the liquid outer core, the processes that maintain the geodynamo over geological time, these are complex problems that are not fully solved, that require sophisticated modeling and that depend on data from seismic studies and from magnetic field observations. These are real mysteries, are genuine gaps in our knowledge about the Earth's interior. But they are not mysteries that suggest a hollow Earth or underground kingdoms. They are mysteries about the details of a complex physical system, are the kinds of questions that science is designed to address through observation and modeling and testing of hypotheses. The difference between these scientific mysteries and the Agartha legend is the difference between questions that are being addressed through evidence-based inquiry and claims that are made without evidence or that persist despite evidence to the contrary. Scientific mysteries are invitations to research, are problems that can be solved through careful work. Legends that are maintained regardless of evidence are different, are based in belief and in the desire for particular kinds of explanations rather than in the willingness to follow the evidence wherever it leads. And yet, having said all this, having established that the hollow Earth is not supported by evidence, and that Agartha, as described in the occult literature, is legend rather than reality, there remains something worth attending to in the persistence of these ideas. The human fascination with what is hidden, with what is beneath the surface, with the possibility of undiscovered realms, is not merely foolishness or irrationality. It is an expression of curiosity, of imagination, of the drive to explore and to know that has led humans to every corner of the planet and beyond. The explorers who search for Agartha, who travel to remote regions looking for hidden entrances to underground kingdoms, are misguided in their specific quest, are searching for something that does not exist in the way they imagine it. But they are motivated by the same impulse that drives scientific exploration, the desire to find what has not been found, to see what has not been seen, to answer questions that have not been answered. The difference is in the method, in whether the search is guided by evidence or by belief, in whether discoveries are tested and verified or are simply claimed. The real underground, the caves and the aquifers and the deep biosphere and the complex geological structures of the mantle and the core, is extraordinary enough, is strange and fascinating and still incompletely known. The work of exploring and understanding the Earth's interior, through caving and through drilling and through seismology and through modeling, is ongoing, is revealing new features and new processes, is expanding our knowledge of the planet we live on. This is the real adventure, the genuine exploration of what is beneath our feet. And it does not require believing in hollow earth theories or in hidden kingdoms to be compelling, to be meaningful, to be worthy of attention and effort. The specific claims about locations of entrances to Agartha, the places where the underground kingdom is supposedly accessible from the surface, are worth examining in detail, both because they tell us about the geography of the legend and because they connect to real places. Real caves and mountains and regions that have their own histories and their own genuine mysteries that are distinct from the legend that has been attached to them. The most commonly cited location for entrances to Agartha is the Himalayan region, particularly Tibet, and specifically locations associated with Buddhist monasteries and sacred sites. The reasoning behind this association is partly geographical. The Himalayas are remote, are difficult to access, are the highest mountains on Earth, and therefore seem appropriate as gateways to hidden realms. And it is partly cultural. Tibetan Buddhism has traditions about hidden valleys and pure lands, has a rich cosmology that includes multiple levels of existence, has practices involving retreat and meditation in caves, all of which can be interpreted by those inclined to such interpretation as evidence of knowledge about underground realms. One specific location that appears frequently in Agartha literature is the Potala Palace in Lhasa, the traditional residence of the Dalai Lamas. The palace is built on a hill, has extensive underground chambers and passages, was constructed over centuries, and has areas that are closed to the public. The occult literature sometimes claims that the Potala has secret passages that lead deep into the earth, that connect to tunnel systems that extend for hundreds of miles, that provide access to Agartha for the initiated. The reality is more mundane. The Potala Palace does have underground chambers built for storage and for other practical purposes. The construction of large buildings on hillsides often involves excavation and the creation of foundation spaces that are underground relative to some parts of the structure, but not relative to others. The palace has been thoroughly documented by scholars and by the Chinese authorities who control access to it. There is no evidence of passages extending deep into the earth, no evidence of tunnel systems beyond what would be expected in a large historic building complex. The conflation of real underground spaces, the storage chambers and the passages within the building, with legendary tunnel systems extending to Agartha, is typical of how the legend operates. A real feature, a genuine underground space, is taken as evidence for a much larger claim, is interpreted through the lens of the legend rather than being understood in its actual context. Another location associated with Agartha is the region around Mount Kailash, a sacred mountain in Tibet that is revered in Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, and Bon, the pre-Buddhist religion of Tibet. Mount Kailash has never been climbed, is protected as a sacred site, is the center of pilgrimage routes that circle the mountain. The occult literature sometimes claims that Mount Kailash is a gateway to Agartha, that there are caves or passages in or beneath the mountain that lead to the underground kingdom, that the spiritual power of the site is connected to its function as an entrance to a hidden realm. Mount Kailash is a real mountain with real geological features and real cultural significance. The region has caves, has been used for meditation and retreat by practitioners of various traditions for centuries. But there is no evidence of passages leading to vast underground chambers, no evidence that the caves extend to unusual depths or connect to tunnel systems. The sacredness of the mountain is based in religious tradition and in the mountain's striking symmetrical form and its central location in the geography of the Tibetan plateau, not in any physical connection to underground kingdoms. The Gobi Desert is another location mentioned in some versions of the Agartha legend. The desert is vast, is sparsely populated, has areas that are remote and difficult to access. Some accounts, including Ossendowski's, locate Agartha beneath the Gobi, suggest that there are underground chambers beneath the desert sands, that the surface barrenness conceals a hidden world below. The geological reality is that the Gobi is a region of sedimentary basins and eroded mountains, does have some caves in limestone outcrops in certain areas, but is not a region where extensive cave systems would be expected to form. The rock types and the geological structures are not conducive to the development of large caves. The underground water is deep and is in aquifers in porous rock, not in open chambers. In the Americas, Mount Shasta in California is sometimes claimed as an entrance to Agartha or to related underground realms. Mount Shasta is a volcanic peak, is sacred to local Native American tribes, has attracted spiritual seekers, and has been the subject of various esoteric claims. The mountain has lava tubes, has some small caves, has been explored and climbed extensively. There is no evidence of passages leading to underground cities, no evidence of unusual depths or of connections to wider tunnel systems. The association of Mount Shasta with underground kingdoms appears to be primarily a 20th century invention, is based more on the mountain's spiritual reputation and its imposing presence than on any geological or historical evidence. The Grand Canyon and other locations in the American Southwest have also been mentioned in some versions of Hollow Earth and underground civilization theories. In 1909, the Arizona Gazette published an article claiming that Smithsonian-funded explorers had discovered an enormous underground citadel in a cave in the Grand Canyon, complete with Egyptian-style artifacts and mummies. The article has never been verified. The Smithsonian has no record of such an expedition. No such cave has been located despite extensive searches by people trying to verify the claim. The article is almost certainly a hoax, a sensational story published in an era when newspaper standards for verification were lax and when exotic archaeology claims sold papers. But the story persists in alternative archaeology circles, is cited as evidence of cover-ups, is used to support claims about ancient advanced civilizations in the Americas and about connections to underground realms. The actual caves in the Grand Canyon region are well documented, have been explored and surveyed, include some that were used by ancestral Puebloan peoples for storage and for burials, but none that resemble the descriptions in the 1909 article. What these examples illustrate is a pattern. The Agartha legend attaches itself to real places, to mountains and caves and remote regions, takes real features and real cultural associations, and interprets them through the lens of the legend, creating a geography of claimed entrances that are always just out of reach. Always in places that are difficult to access, always protected by secrecy or by guardians or by the difficulty of the terrain. This pattern is similar to other legends about hidden places, about El Dorado and Atlantis and other lost cities and civilizations. The location is always just beyond the current frontier of exploration, is always in the places that have not yet been thoroughly mapped, and as those places become mapped and explored and found not to contain the legendary sites, the legend shifts, relocates to other regions that are still mysterious, still unknown. This is not to say that all claims about undiscovered sites are false. There are real archaeological sites that have been found in remote regions that were unknown to modern scholarship until they were discovered. Machu Picchu was not known to the outside world until Hiram Bingham was led to it by local people in 1911, though it was known to locals and had never been truly lost. The ancient city of Angkor in Cambodia was overgrown by jungle and was largely forgotten by the outside world until French explorers documented it in the 19th century. The Nazca lines in Peru were not recognized for what they were until aerial photography made their full extent visible in the early 20th century. The discovery of unknown archaeological sites remains possible, particularly in regions that have not been thoroughly surveyed, particularly in areas where dense vegetation or difficult terrain has prevented systematic exploration. But the sites that have been discovered, even the most impressive and unexpected ones, have all been surface sites or shallow cave sites, have all been accessible through normal exploration, have all been within the crust, not deep underground, not in vast chambers thousands of meters below the surface. The legitimate archaeological frontier is on the surface and in the shallow subsurface, not in the deep earth. And the methods that have been successful in finding new sites, satellite imagery, aerial survey, systematic ground survey, excavation based on historical texts or local knowledge, these methods would also reveal entrances to vast underground tunnel systems if such systems existed. The fact that they have not been found despite extensive exploration and mapping is strong evidence that they do not exist. There are, however, real underground cities and structures created by humans that are genuinely remarkable, that demonstrate the human capacity to create extensive underground spaces, that show that substantial populations can live and work underground for extended periods. These real underground constructions are worth examining because they show what is actually possible, what humans have actually achieved in modifying the underground environment, and because they provide a reality check against the claims about Agartha. Derinkuyu in Cappadocia, Turkey, is one of the most impressive underground cities ever discovered. Carved into the soft volcanic rock of the region, Derinkuyu extends to a depth of approximately 85 meters, has multiple levels, has chambers and tunnels and ventilation shafts, had capacity for thousands of people, along with their livestock and food stores. The city was carved over many centuries, was used by various populations as refuge during periods of invasion and warfare, was forgotten and was rediscovered in the 1960s. The extent of Derinkuyu and of other underground cities in Cappadocia, there are several in the region, is remarkable. But the depth is less than 100 meters, is in the shallow subsurface, is carved from soft rock that can be excavated with hand tools, is nothing like the deep tunnel systems described in Agartha legends. The Khu Khai tunnels in Vietnam, created during the Vietnam War by the Viet Cong, were extensive networks of underground passages used for living quarters, storage, hospitals, command centers. The tunnels extended for hundreds of kilometers total, were multi-level, were ingeniously designed to be difficult for enemy forces to penetrate, had hidden entrances and booby traps and narrow passages that favored the smaller stature of Vietnamese fighters. The Khu Khai tunnels demonstrate what can be achieved with determination and manual labor, show that extensive underground networks can be created for strategic purposes. But again, the depths were shallow, a few meters below the surface. The tunnels were in soil and soft sediment, were not deep caves or passages extending into bedrock. The Paris catacombs, the network of tunnels beneath Paris that holds the remains of millions of people, transferred from overcrowded cemeteries in the late 18th and 19th centuries, extend for hundreds of kilometers. The tunnels were originally limestone quarries, were excavated over centuries to provide building stone for the growing city, were then repurposed as ossuaries. The catacombs are extensive, are complex, have areas that are open to the public and areas that are closed, have attracted urban explorers who navigate the forbidden sections illegally. But the depth is less than 30 meters. The tunnels are in the limestone layers beneath the city, are entirely within the shallow subsurface. These real underground constructions, impressive as they are at depths measured in tens of meters, not in hundreds or thousands of meters. They are in soft rock or in soil, are created through excavation that is labor-intensive but achievable with hand tools or with simple machinery. They show what is possible, but they also show the limits of what is possible. Show that creating large underground spaces requires either natural cave formation or enormous amounts of human labor, and that the depths that can be achieved are limited by practical considerations of ventilation, of water management, of structural stability of access. The claim that there are tunnel systems extending for thousands of kilometers at depths of thousands of meters, that these tunnels connect to vast inhabited chambers, that they have remained hidden despite centuries of exploration and mapping, is not supported by what we know about underground construction. is not consistent with the limitations that real underground engineering faces. But let us consider a different question. If we set aside the literal claims about Agartha, if we approach the legend not as a claim about physical reality, but as a cultural and psychological phenomenon, what can it tell us about human needs and human imagination, about the functions that legends serve, about why the idea of a hidden underground kingdom resonates across cultures and time periods? Legends of underground realms, of hidden cities, of places where ancient knowledge is preserved, serve several functions. They provide hope, suggest that despite the apparent problems and limitations of the surface world, there are places where things are better, where wisdom and harmony and advanced understanding exist, where the solutions to surface problems are known. This is the utopian function of the legend, the provision of an ideal that is not present in the everyday world, but that is believed to exist somewhere, that provides a model or a goal. They provide explanation for mysteries, account for things that are not understood through reference to hidden causes, to knowledge or powers that operate out of sight. This is the cosmological function, the creation of a framework that makes sense of anomalies and of questions that remain unanswered. They provide a sense of the numinous, of the sacred, of dimensions of reality that are beyond the ordinary and the mundane, that require special access or special worthiness to reach. This is the spiritual function, the acknowledgement that not everything can be accessed through ordinary means, that there are realms that are hidden and that remain hidden for reasons that are themselves significant. And they provide adventure, provide goals for exploration, provide motivation for journeys to remote places, for the search for hidden entrances, for the attempt to access what has been concealed. This is the quest function, the provision of a purpose that goes beyond ordinary life, that gives meaning to travel and to seeking. These functions are not trivial. They address real human needs, needs for hope and for meaning and for mystery and for purpose. The fact that Agartha does not exist as a physical place does not mean that the legend is without value. It means that the value is in what the legend expresses and enables, not in the literal truth of the claims. The danger comes when the symbolic is taken as literal, when the legend becomes a substitute for engagement with reality, when the search for Agartha prevents the recognition of the genuine wonders and the genuine mysteries that are accessible, that are real, that can be explored and understood through evidence-based inquiry. There is a parallel here with religious and spiritual traditions more broadly. The sacred places and the cosmological realms described in religious texts and traditions serve functions that are primarily spiritual and cultural, provide frameworks for understanding existence, and for orienting human life toward values and purposes that transcend the individual. The question of whether these sacred places exist as physical locations is often beside the point, is not what the traditions are primarily about. Shambhala in Tibetan Buddhist tradition, as I mentioned earlier, is understood by practitioners not primarily as a physical place to be found by ordinary geographical exploration, but as a pure land, a realm that exists in relation to spiritual practice and realization. That may have physical correlates, but that is primarily accessed through meditation, and through the cultivation of wisdom and compassion. The conflation of this spiritual understanding with the literal geography of Agartha, with the claim that there is a physical underground city that can be reached by walking through tunnels, is a misunderstanding of what the Buddhist tradition is actually saying. Similarly, the underworlds and other worlds of various mythological traditions are not primarily claims about geological structures, but are cosmological frameworks, are ways of organizing understanding of life and death and the structure of existence. To read them as literal geography is to miss the point, is to confuse the symbolic with the physical. The challenge for those who are drawn to the Agartha legend is to distinguish between the legitimate functions that the legend serves, the expression of hope and wonder and the search for meaning, and the literal claims about physical reality that are not supported by evidence. It is possible to appreciate the legend as legend, to find value in what it expresses about human longing and imagination, without needing to believe that it is literally true. And for those who are committed to evidence-based understanding of the world, the challenge is to recognize that not all human needs are met by empirical knowledge, that the need for meaning and for the sacred and for mystery is legitimate even if it cannot be satisfied purely through scientific investigation. That there is value in myth and in imagination, and in the exploration of questions that go beyond what can be measured. The real underground, the caves and the geological structures and the deep biosphere provides genuine wonder, provides real mysteries, provides opportunities for exploration and discovery that are based in evidence, that can be verified, that expand our knowledge of the planet. The scientific exploration of the Earth's interior through seismology and through drilling and through the study of how the planet systems work is ongoing, is revealing new features and new processes, is answering questions that were unanswerable a generation ago. This is the real adventure, the genuine frontier. And it does not require believing in legends to be extraordinary, to be meaningful, to be worthy of attention and awe. But the legends persist, and they will continue to persist because they serve needs that science alone does not fully address. Because the human imagination seeks not just what is, but what might be, not just the mapped, but the unmapped, not just the known, but the unknown and the unknowable. The balance is in holding both, in appreciating the power and the beauty of myth and legend, while also respecting the discipline and the rigor of evidence-based inquiry, in being able to say that Agartha is a powerful symbol and an enduring legend without needing to claim that it is a physical reality. In being able to search for meaning and mystery in the world as it is rather than only in the world as we might wish it to be. The earth beneath our feet is vast and complex and still incompletely understood. There are real mysteries in the deep crust and in the mantle and in the core. There are processes that we are still working to comprehend. There are features that we are still discovering. The exploration of this real underground through the methods that allow us to peer into regions we cannot physically access, through the careful accumulation of evidence and the testing of hypotheses, is the ongoing work of geophysics and of geology and of planetary science. And alongside this scientific exploration, the legends continue, the stories about what might be beneath, the imaginative constructions that fill the gaps in knowledge with possibility, that express the hope that reality is larger and stranger than the official narratives allow. The legends are not going away. They are part of the human relationship with the unknown, are expressions of the drive to explore and to wonder that has always characterized human culture. The question is not whether to believe the legends or to reject them entirely, but how to hold them, how to appreciate them for what they are while also maintaining commitment to truth, to evidence, to the discipline of distinguishing between what is imagined and what is real. This is difficult work, requires nuance, requires the ability to think in multiple registers simultaneously, to appreciate myth as myth while also pursuing empirical knowledge, to search for meaning in ways that do not require rejecting what we know about the physical world. The echoes of Agartha, the whispers of the legend that persist in popular culture and in alternative archaeology, and in the imaginations of people who are drawn to mysteries, these echoes tell us something important about ourselves, about our needs and our longings and our relationship to the unknown. They are worth listening to, worth trying to understand, even as we also listen to the evidence, to the seismic waves that travel through the earth and tell us about its structure, to the data from drilling and from gravitational studies and from magnetic field measurements that build the picture of what is actually beneath our feet. Both are part of the human exploration of the earth, the scientific and the imaginative, the evidential and the legendary. And understanding the relationship between them, understanding how they inform and sometimes confuse each other, is part of the work of understanding ourselves, of understanding how we know what we know, and how we relate to what we do not know. How we navigate the boundary between the mapped and the unmapped, the certain and the uncertain, the real and the imagined. The modern manifestation of the Agartha legend, the way it exists in contemporary culture and consciousness, is worth examining in detail because it reveals how ancient mythological patterns adapt to new contexts, how the encounter between traditional spiritual frameworks and modern technology creates new forms of the old stories, how the legend evolves to address contemporary anxieties and aspirations. In the late 20th and early 21st centuries, the Agartha legend has been absorbed into the broader landscape of alternative history and conspiracy theory, has been connected to narratives about UFOs and extraterrestrials, about government cover-ups and secret technologies, about ancient advanced civilizations and lost knowledge. This is a significant transformation of the original esoteric legend, represents a shift from spiritual cosmology to what might be called techno-mysticism, a blending of spiritual seeking with fascination with technology and with distrust of official narratives. One strand of contemporary Agartha belief connects the underground kingdom to UFO phenomena, suggests that the flying saucers that people report seeing are not from outer space, but from inner Earth, from Agartha, or from related underground civilizations. This theory, sometimes called the intraterrestrial hypothesis, proposes that the advanced beings who are said to pilot UFOs are actually inhabitants of underground realms, that they have bases inside the Earth, that they emerge through the polar openings or through other entrances to monitor surface activity, or to interact with surface dwellers for various purposes. The intraterrestrial hypothesis is an attempt to account for UFO reports without requiring interstellar travel, without needing to explain how beings from distant star systems could reach Earth. If the UFO occupants are from inside the Earth rather than from other planets, the distances are much smaller, the logistics are more manageable. This seems, to proponents of the theory, more plausible than the extraterrestrial hypothesis. But the intraterrestrial hypothesis faces the same evidentiary problems as the extraterrestrial hypothesis, which is that despite thousands of reported UFO sightings and encounters, there is no physical evidence that has been verified and accepted by the scientific community as demonstrating the existence of craft that operate with technologies beyond current human capabilities, no verified physical evidence of non-human intelligent beings. No materials or artifacts that cannot be explained as either human-made or as natural phenomena misidentified. The connection to Agartha adds an additional layer of claims that require evidence, claims about underground civilizations and tunnel systems, claims that are not supported by the geological and seismological evidence about the Earth's interior. The intraterrestrial hypothesis is, in effect, a double claim, requires believing both that UFOs are real physical craft operated by intelligent beings, and that those beings come from extensive underground habitats that have somehow remained hidden despite extensive exploration and mapping of the Earth's surface and subsurface. Another contemporary strand connects Agartha to claims about ancient advanced civilizations to the idea that there were technologically sophisticated societies in the deep past before recorded history, that these civilizations had knowledge and capabilities that equal or exceed our own, and that they either destroyed themselves through war or natural catastrophe, or deliberately went underground into tunnel systems and underground cities to escape surface catastrophes, or to pursue a different path of development away from the destructive tendencies of surface civilizations. This narrative is part of a broader alternative history framework that questions the standard archaeological timeline, that suggests human civilization is much older than mainstream scholarship acknowledges, that there have been rises and falls of advanced societies that have been forgotten or deliberately obscured. The evidence cited for these claims typically includes ancient structures like the pyramids of Egypt, megalithic sites like Stonehenge, and the stone circles of the British Isles, the Nazca lines in Peru, underwater structures that some claim are remnants of ancient cities. Anomalous artifacts that seem out of place in the archaeological record. Mainstream archaeology and history address all of these features through explanations that do not require advanced lost civilizations. The pyramids and the megaliths are remarkable achievements, but are explicable as the work of the societies that mainstream archaeology says built them, using the tools and the organizational capacities that those societies possessed. The underwater structures that have been claimed as ancient cities are, in most cases, natural geological formations, are features created by erosion and sedimentation that happen to resemble human constructions, but that show no clear evidence of being artificial. The anomalous artifacts, when investigated carefully, are usually found to be either misidentified or misunderstood in their context, or in some cases deliberate hoaxes. The claim that ancient advanced civilizations went underground, that they built Agartha or similar underground kingdoms and have been living there for thousands of years, is an attempt to explain why the physical evidence for these civilizations is not found on the surface, is a way of maintaining the belief in ancient advanced societies despite the absence of the archaeological evidence that such societies would leave. But this explanation requires its own evidence, requires demonstrating that the underground tunnel systems and cities exist, and that evidence is not there. The pattern is circular. The belief in ancient advanced civilizations requires explaining why the evidence is not found. The explanation is that they went underground. But the claim that they went underground requires evidence of the underground habitats. That evidence is not found. The explanation for why it is not found is that the tunnels and cities are hidden, are secret, are protected by forces that prevent their discovery. And so the belief is maintained in the absence of evidence, is protected by layers of explanation that move the required proof always one step beyond what is currently accessible. This is a hallmark of unfalsifiable claims, of beliefs that are structured in such a way that no evidence could disprove them, because any absence of evidence is interpreted as evidence of concealment rather than as evidence of absence. The scientific approach is different, is based on the principle that claims should be proportional to evidence, that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, that absence of evidence, while not always evidence of absence, is at minimum a reason for skepticism, is a reason to withhold belief until evidence is presented. The emotional and psychological appeal of the ancient advanced civilization narrative and its connection to Agartha is understandable. It offers a counter to the mainstream historical narrative that presents human civilization as a relatively recent development, as a progression from simple to complex over the last 10,000 years or so. It suggests that we are not the first, that there have been others before us who achieved great things, that knowledge has been lost and could potentially be recovered, that the current state of the world is not the pinnacle of human achievement, but is perhaps a decline from greater heights reached in the past. This narrative can be empowering, can suggest that solutions to contemporary problems might be found by recovering ancient knowledge, can offer hope that humanity is capable of more than the current evidence suggests. But it can also be a form of escapism, can direct attention and energy away from the real challenges and possibilities of the present toward an imagined past that serves as a projection screen for contemporary desires and frustrations. The phenomenon of people traveling to remote locations to search for entrances to Agartha or to other claimed underground realms continues into the present. These expeditions are sometimes organized by believers in the legend, sometimes by entrepreneurs who cater to the market of people interested in alternative archaeology and esoteric spirituality. The destinations are typically the locations mentioned in the legend: Tibet and the Himalayas, Mount Shasta, the Grand Canyon region, remote caves and mountain areas that are associated with spiritual traditions or with local legends. What these expeditions find, when they are honest about their findings, is what any traveler to these regions finds. Real caves and mountains and remote landscapes, places that are beautiful and in some cases spiritually significant to local cultures, places that have their own histories and their own genuine mysteries that are unrelated to Agartha. The entrances to vast underground tunnel systems, the hidden chambers with ancient libraries and advanced technologies, these are not found because they do not exist in the way the legend describes. But for the participants in these expeditions, the search itself can be meaningful, can be a form of pilgrimage, can provide experiences of connection to place and to tradition, and to the quest for something beyond the ordinary that have value regardless of whether the stated goal is achieved. The journey can be transformative even if the destination is not reached, can provide insights and experiences that are valuable in themselves. This is a common pattern in spiritual quests, in pilgrimages to sacred sites, in the journeys that people undertake in search of meaning or enlightenment or connection. The literal goal, reaching the sacred place or finding the hidden knowledge, may be less important than the process of the journey, the transformation that occurs through the effort and the intention and the openness to experience that the quest requires. The question is whether the search for Agartha can be undertaken with this understanding, with the recognition that the value is in the journey and in what the seeker brings to it, rather than in the literal discovery of an underground kingdom. Or whether the belief in the literal reality of Agartha is necessary to motivate the quest, is essential to the meaning that participants derive from the experience. For some, the recognition that Agartha is legend rather than physical reality would undermine the entire enterprise, would make the journey pointless. For others, the symbolic and spiritual dimensions of the quest would remain meaningful even with the understanding that the literal claims are not supported by evidence. This difference in approach reflects deeper differences in how people relate to myth and to spiritual tradition, in whether the value is seen as residing in literal truth or in symbolic and experiential dimensions. The scientific investigation of claims about Agartha and Hollow Earth has been limited, not because of conspiracy or cover-up, but because the claims are not formulated in ways that allow for scientific testing, are not specific enough to generate testable predictions, or when they are specific enough, the predictions fail when tested. A hollow Earth with openings at the poles would create gravitational and magnetic anomalies that would be detectable and that are not observed. Tunnel systems extending for thousands of kilometers at depths of thousands of meters would affect seismic wave propagation in ways that would be visible in seismological data and that are not observed. The absence of these predicted effects is evidence against the hollow Earth theories. But for believers, this absence is explained by claiming that the measurements are wrong, or that the data is being suppressed, or that the underground features are somehow shielded or hidden in ways that make them undetectable by current methods. These explanations require their own evidence and their own mechanisms, and when those are not provided or are themselves untestable, The belief system becomes closed, becomes immune to evidence, becomes unfalsifiable. The relationship between the Agartha legend and indigenous and traditional knowledge systems is complex and requires careful attention. Many of the locations associated with Agartha, Tibet, and the Himalayas in particular are places where indigenous and traditional cultures have deep roots, have their own spiritual traditions and their own relationships to the landscape. The Western occult appropriation of these traditions. The extraction of concepts like Shambhala from their original Buddhist contexts and their incorporation into the Agartha legend represents a form of cultural appropriation, takes elements from cultures that have been colonized or marginalized, and reinterprets them through Western esoteric frameworks that may distort or misrepresent the original meanings. Tibetan Buddhist traditions about Shambhala, as practiced and understood by Tibetan Buddhists, are not primarily about a physical underground city accessible through tunnel systems. They are about a pure land, a realm associated with spiritual practice and enlightenment, a concept that operates within a complex cosmological and soteriological framework. To take this concept and to literalize it, to place it underground in physical geography, to disconnect it from its religious context and its practices, is to fundamentally misunderstand and misrepresent what the tradition is actually teaching. This pattern of appropriation and misrepresentation is common in the history of Western engagement with Eastern spiritual traditions, is part of a broader pattern of Orientalism, of projecting Western desires and fantasies onto Eastern cultures, of seeing the East as a repository of ancient wisdom or spiritual authenticity that the West has lost without engaging seriously with the actual traditions on their own terms. The respectful engagement with Tibetan Buddhism or with any traditional spiritual system requires approaching it as a living tradition practiced by living communities, requires learning from practitioners and teachers within the tradition, requires understanding the concepts within their proper contexts rather than extracting them and reinterpreting them to fit Western esoteric frameworks. The Agartha legend, as it has developed in Western occultism, does not represent this kind of respectful engagement, represents instead a form of imaginative appropriation that serves Western spiritual and psychological needs at the expense of accurately representing the traditions it draws on. This is not to say that cross-cultural spiritual exchange is inherently problematic, that Western seekers should not engage with Eastern traditions, or that ideas cannot be adapted across cultural boundaries. But the engagement should be informed, should be respectful, should acknowledge the sources and the contexts, should not claim to represent traditional teachings when it is actually presenting modern Western inventions. The environmental dimension of cave exploration and of the search for underground realms is worth considering. Caves are fragile environments, are ecosystems that are easily damaged by human presence, that contain formations that have taken thousands or millions of years to develop, and that can be destroyed in moments by careless visitors. The exploration of caves, whether in search of Agartha or for scientific or recreational purposes, carries responsibilities, requires minimizing impact, requires following established protocols for cave conservation. The major cave systems of the world, the systems that are scientifically significant or that are of recreational interest, are increasingly managed to balance access with conservation. Some caves are closed to all but scientific researchers. Some are open to the public through guided tour, with strict controls on where visitors can go and what they can touch. Some are open to experienced cavers who have the skills and the knowledge to move through the caves without causing damage, who understand the ethics of cave exploration, the principles of leaving no trace, of documenting rather than collecting, of preserving the cave environment for future visitors and future generations. The search for Agartha, when it leads people into remote caves without proper preparation or understanding, when it motivates trespass into protected areas or into privately owned caves, when it results in damage to cave formations or to archaeological or paleontological sites within caves, is problematic not just because the search is based on unfounded beliefs, but because it has real negative impacts on fragile environments and on the scientific and cultural resources that caves contain. The responsible approach to cave exploration, whether motivated by scientific interest or by recreational caving or by spiritual seeking, is to acquire the necessary skills to respect the regulations and the ownership of cave systems, to minimize impact, to contribute to conservation efforts, to engage with the caving community and with the land managers and with the indigenous communities who may have cultural connections to specific caves. Let me turn now to a synthesis, to an attempt to draw together the various threads of this exploration, and to offer some conclusions about what the Agartha legend tells us, about what we can learn from examining it carefully, about how to hold the tension between appreciation for myth and commitment to evidence-based understanding. The legend of Agartha is not true in its literal claims. The earth is not hollow. There are not vast tunnel systems extending thousands of kilometers into the planet. There are not underground cities housing ancient civilizations with advanced knowledge and technology. The entrances to such realms do not exist in Tibet or at Mount Shasta or in the Grand Canyon or anywhere else. The scientific evidence is clear and consistent on these points, is based on multiple independent lines of investigation, is not the result of conspiracy or cover-up. But the legend is true in a different sense, is true as myth, as a cultural and psychological phenomenon that reveals important things about human needs and human imagination. The persistence of the legend, its ability to attract belief and to motivate searches and to inspire elaborate cosmologies despite the lack of evidence, tells us that there are needs, that the legend addresses needs that are not fully met by the mapped and known and rationalized world. Needs for mystery and for the sacred, and for the possibility of discovery, for connection to ancient wisdom, and for hope that reality is larger than the official narratives allow. These needs are legitimate. The human need for meaning, for connection to something larger than the individual life, for a sense that existence has purpose and direction, these are fundamental needs, are not satisfied by purely materialist or reductionist frameworks. The fact that science can explain many features of the physical world does not mean that scientific explanation provides everything that humans need, does not mean that the questions about meaning and value and purpose are answered by understanding the mechanisms of nature. Religion and spirituality and myth have always addressed these questions, have provided frameworks for understanding existence that go beyond the empirical, that connect the individual to community and to tradition and to transcendent values. The challenge in the modern world. In an age when scientific knowledge has expanded dramatically, and when many traditional religious frameworks have been called into question, is to find ways to address these fundamental human needs without requiring the rejection of evidence, without constructing beliefs that are incompatible with what we know about the physical world. The Agartha legend, in its current form, asks for belief in physical claims that are not supported by evidence, asks for acceptance of a cosmology that conflicts with established scientific understanding. This creates a conflict, forces a choice between the legend and the evidence, between belief and knowledge. But it does not have to be this way. The underlying themes of the legend, the search for hidden wisdom, the journey to sacred places, the quest for transformation and enlightenment, these can be pursued without requiring belief in literal underground kingdoms. The symbolic and spiritual dimensions of the quest can be honored without conflating them with physical geography. The caves and mountains that are associated with the legend can be approached with reverence and with openness to the experiences they offer without needing to believe that they are entrances to Agartha. This is the path of holding myth as myth, of appreciating the power and the beauty of legendary narratives, while also respecting the discipline of evidence-based inquiry. It requires a kind of cognitive flexibility, requires being able to think in multiple registers, to engage with symbolic and spiritual dimensions of experience without needing to literalize them, to search for meaning and for connection in ways that are compatible with honest engagement with evidence. This is not easy. The modern Western mind has been trained, particularly over the last few centuries, to equate truth with literal factual accuracy, to see value only in what can be empirically verified. This materialist framework has been enormously productive in scientific and technological domains, has led to the expansion of knowledge and capability in ways that are genuinely remarkable. But it has also created a kind of poverty, a flattening of experience, a loss of connection to the symbolic and the mythic and the sacred that characterized pre-modern consciousness. The attraction of legends like Agartha, for many people, is that they offer a way back to enchantment, offer a resacralization of the world, offer the possibility that reality is not just the mechanistic interplay of matter and energy, but has depth and meaning and mystery. The yearning for this is real and is understandable. The question is whether the re-enchantment requires false beliefs, requires accepting claims about the physical world that are not supported by evidence, or whether it is possible to find enchantment and meaning and mystery in the world as it actually is. In the genuine wonders and the genuine mysteries that are accessible through careful observation and inquiry. The real Earth, the planet as we understand it through geology and geophysics, and planetary science is extraordinary. The processes that formed the planet, the differentiation of the core and the mantle, and the crust, the plate tectonics that continue to shape the surface, the magnetic field generated by the liquid iron core, the deep biosphere of microorganisms living in the crust, the vast cave systems carved by water. The geological history recorded in the rock layers, the deep time that stretches back billions of years. All of this is remarkable, is genuinely awe-inspiring, is worthy of wonder and reverence. The exploration of this real Earth, through science and through careful observation, through caving and through mountaineering, and through the study of rocks and minerals and seismic waves, is an ongoing adventure, is revealing new features and new processes, is expanding the boundaries of what we know. This exploration does not require believing in hollow earth theories or in underground kingdoms. It requires curiosity and patience and the willingness to follow evidence, to test hypotheses, to revise understanding when new information becomes available. And alongside the scientific exploration, there is room for the symbolic and the spiritual, for the recognition that caves are liminal spaces, are thresholds between the surface and the depths, between the known and the unknown, between the ordinary and the sacred. The experience of entering a cave, of moving from light into darkness, of descending into the earth, of being surrounded by stone that is millions of years old. This is a powerful experience, has been recognized as spiritually significant in cultures around the world. Is a real encounter with something that transcends the individual and the immediate. This spiritual dimension of caves does not require believing that they are entrances to Agartha. It requires being present to the experience, being open to what the cave offers, allowing the encounter with depth and darkness and ancient stone to work on consciousness in ways that are transformative. The same is true of mountains, of remote landscapes, of the places that have been associated with the Agartha legend. These places have their own power, their own beauty, their own capacity to inspire and to challenge, and to transform those who approach them with attention and respect. The power is in the places themselves, in their physical reality, and in the cultural and spiritual significance that has been invested in them over centuries or millennia, not in the legendary tunnel systems that do not exist. The exploration of the Agartha legend, the investigation of its origins and its evolution and its contemporary manifestations, is valuable not because it validates the literal claims, but because it illuminates the human relationship with the unknown, with the hidden, with the depths beneath the surface, both literal and metaphorical. The legend is a lens through which we can examine our own needs and longings, our relationship to evidence, and to belief, our capacity for wonder and for wishful thinking. Our ability to create elaborate cosmologies that serve psychological and spiritual functions, even when they do not correspond to physical reality. If you have stayed with this exploration through all four parts, through the examination of the legend and the investigation of the evidence and the consideration of what the persistence of the belief tells us about ourselves, I thank you. This has been a journey into territory that is contested, that exists at the boundary between the imaginative and the real, that requires navigating carefully between respect for myth and commitment to truth. The echoes of Agartha continue to resonate, continue to be heard in popular culture and in alternative archaeology, and in the spiritual seeking of people who are searching for something beyond the mapped world. These echoes are worth listening to, not because they lead to underground kingdoms, but because they reveal something about the human condition, about the needs that persist even in an age of science and technology, about the yearning for mystery and meaning that is part of what makes us human. The real adventure is in the world that we can see and touch and investigate, is in the caves that actually exist, and in the mountains that actually rise, and in the depths of the earth that we can study through seismic waves, even though we cannot physically visit them. The real mystery is in the questions that remain unanswered about how the planet works, about how life arose and evolved, about the history recorded in the rocks, about the processes that shape the surface and the interior. And the real wisdom, if there is wisdom to be found, is not hidden in underground libraries waiting to be discovered by the worthy. It is being slowly, painstakingly accumulated through the work of scientists and scholars and explorers who are asking questions and testing hypotheses and following evidence, who are building cumulative knowledge that is available to anyone who is willing to engage with it seriously. The legend of Agartha offers a shortcut, offers the possibility of accessing ancient wisdom without the hard work of study and investigation, offers hidden knowledge that bypasses the discipline of evidence-based inquiry. This is part of its appeal. But it is also a false promise, because the wisdom that comes without effort, that is given rather than earned, that requires only belief rather than understanding, is not wisdom at all. Real understanding, whether of the physical world or of the spiritual dimensions of existence, requires engagement, requires effort, requires the willingness to grapple with complexity and with uncertainty, requires the humility to recognize what we do not know and the discipline to distinguish between what we know and what we believe. The hollow earth is not real. Agartha is not real in the way the legends describe it. But the human search for meaning, the drive to explore and to understand, the capacity for wonder and for reverence, the need for connection to something larger than ourselves, these are real. These are the echoes that resonate through the legend. These are what we hear when we listen carefully to what the story of Agartha is trying to tell us. The earth beneath our feet is solid, is layered, is complex, is vast beyond our complete comprehension. The spaces within it, the caves and the fissures and the aquifers, are real and are remarkable. The processes that shape it, the movements of tectonic plates and the flow of heat from the interior and the cycles of rock formation and destruction, are real and are ongoing. The mystery is not in imagined hollow spaces, but in the genuine complexity of the planet, in the questions that remain unanswered, in the features that we are still discovering. And the journey, the search, the quest for understanding and for meaning continues. Not into imagined underground kingdoms, but into the real world, into the depths that are accessible through inquiry and exploration, into the questions that can be answered through evidence and careful thought, into the experiences that are available to those who approach the world with openness and with respect. The legend of Agartha will persist, will continue to attract belief and to inspire searches and to generate elaborate theories. This is the nature of legends, is part of how humans relate to the unknown, but we can hold the legend lightly, can appreciate it for what it reveals about us rather than for what it claims about the earth, can search for the real wisdom and the real mystery in the world that is actually here beneath our feet and around us and within us, waiting to be discovered through the patient, disciplined, endlessly rewarding work of genuine exploration. The echoes of Agartha whisper still, but they are echoes of human longing, of human imagination, of the eternal human search for what lies beyond the horizon, beyond the known, beyond the mapped. And that search is real, is valuable, is worthy. The question is only where we direct it, whether into fantasies that cannot be verified or into the real world that offers wonders enough, mysteries enough, depth enough, to satisfy any searching heart that approaches it with honesty and with care. The hollow earth is not there, but the earth that is there, solid and ancient and complex and beautiful, is enough, more than enough. It is everything, and the exploration of it, the genuine exploration through science and through experience and through the opening of awareness to what is actually present, is the adventure that is available to us, is the quest that is real, is the journey that leads not to imagined kingdoms, but to understanding, to wonder, to the authentic encounter with mystery that is possible only when we are willing to see what is actually there, rather than only what we wish to be there.